folks. I'm here today with hello, folks. I'm here today with Sue Eastwood from Toronto, and we're going to do another interview. Um, I'm Jivan Rende from Nasha Macedonia, an emerging organization in Australia which is dedicated to promoting, protecting our human rights, celebrating our culture, honoring our high achievers, and hopefully through education inspire other activists. Good evening, Sue. How are you?
Hi, Jivan. I'm very well, and I'm really happy and excited to be speaking to you.
Um, um,
I've been looking forward to this.
the feeling is mutual. So I have to say, you were one of my first Facebook friends. You
You
know,
were saying, I know.
we go back
Well,
to
well,
2016.
okay. All right. So that's been a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it
And
was
that
great.
was, yeah, I guess we met in another group. I think Facebook was just kind of emerging at that point, and groups were
Yeah,
starting to pop up.
yeah.
So we
We
were
met,
just kind
we
of all,
met, we met in Viva, the group that I started. That's how
ah,
we met. That's how we met.
okay.
And
Yeah, I wasn't sure which group it was, but yeah, there were groups kind of popping up. But yeah, that's yes, yes, that's
and and and
it's a great tool.
Viva was good for its time. But now your group, I'm really excited about your group because there's conversations happening on there. People
Yeah,
sharing their emotions, their knowledge, everything. So please keep going.
yeah.
You're
Thank
at
you.
55.
That's the goal is just to get people to engage, getting people to join and to share their knowledge. The whole idea is to um not let things die with our generation. We want to pass things on to the next generations. And Facebook's a good tool for that because it's a place where we can all meet in the group. And like my mom, for example, she never really wrote recipes down, and her mom didn't write recipes down. It was something that, the generations largely like they did live together. So when you were married into a family, you moved into the man's household. A lot of the villages did. My mom did that. She moved
Yeah,
into my dad's family. So she learned as much from my baba from my dad's side as she did from her own mom. And these things just weren't written down. They were just it's like osmosis. You just learned by being in the environment, but that doesn't really work here. And I found that I would ask my mom for recipes, and she would start. There was nowhere that she went and would come and bring me a recipe. She just started, off memory, just reaming off things. So I figured start writing it down. But even more so, it'd be great if I learned like your family recipes too, instead of just, I'm isolated here in Canada, like you guys are isolated in Melbourne. The villages, all the different villages and parts of Macedonia are far away. So when we come to a group, it's like being in that village and all the
correct,
villages around you.
correct, correct. And your group isn't a village; it's a town, quite a big
It's
town,
it's a
and
town now. Yeah.
that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Look, talking about recipes, we have to understand. Uh, I didn't. I only appreciated five. I only spent 5 years growing up in a village, right? But then I spent the rest of my life listening to my parents and our friends talk about it. So writing down a recipe in those days, you couldn't just go to the shop and buy things that you needed. So the recipe was like fluid. You used what you had. Also,
Yeah. Exactly. And that's how all the regional variations in the
Yeah,
recipes evolved because people
that's
use
right.
what they have and what's abundant in where they grow. And uh, I love to hear, like, I'll post, for example, a recipe. I'll post it the way my mom showed me. It doesn't mean it's the right way. It just means that's the way my mom showed me. And that's the way in Bukovo or
Yeah,
Bitolsko they happen to make that dish. But someone else will jump in on the conversation from like Prespa or from
yeah, yeah,
Skopje or from
yeah.
Veles or Prilep, and they'll have a different take on the same dish. None of it's wrong. It's all absolutely correct. And that's the beauty of the group is that we get to hear all of it and we get to try different things.
The other beauty about your group is no arguments, or
Yeah,
minimal. Yeah, that's beautiful, and it's a credit to you for keeping that harmony and peace. So let's go.
Thank
Let's
you.
go back.
You
Right?
know,
You
it's
mentioned.
no easy task. You know that too.
Look, let's go back to who you are. Right? Where your family's from. Tell me something about your family's background. Where you were born, and yours is an interesting story with your dad coming to Australia and so on. So let's start from your grandparents and parents. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's sure. I'm game for anything you want to discuss, any direction you want to go in. I'm an open book. So dad is from Bukovo. It's Bitolska Okolia. Dad grew up there. His generations of the Straklevsky family are from Bukovo. The family house is still there. I have family. My uncle lives there. My cousin and his family live there in the house that my dad grew up in and my grandfather grew up in. And my mom is also from a Bitolsko selo called Dolmo Srpci,
I
and it's
know
the
it.
same thing.
I know it.
That's so
So,
cool.
so
So she grew up there, like lots of generations. And then the villages would have, Panagid, or like they would have their special holidays for the village. So when Bukovo had us one of these, they called it Panagid. It was like a big picnic, like a big party. Everyone would Bukovo would host it. All the surrounding villages would come, and that's where my parents met. My dad was living already in Australia at that point. My dad had been living in Australia for 10 years at that point. So he thought it's time for a vacation. He'd kind of established himself and he went back to Macedonia with the mindset, I need to find a wife. I want a Macedonian wife. So that was his mission, and it was mission accomplished. He met my mom, their eyes met, and he said that was it. He done deal. He's like, he saw her, said hi to her, saw her walk away, and then ran over to his sister and said, "Do you know that girl? Who's that girl? The one with the eyes, the one so shareni te ochi, chupeto so shareni te
oh,
ochi."
is that what he
No,
said?
yeah. And my it was my aunt that he asked, and she says, "Oh, that's Boyana." And then she went over to my mom and made an excuse for my mom to go back to talk to my dad, and that excuse was Pande saka chasha voda. Możesz to jeszcze budujesz voda. That was the excuse. And so my mom went scurrying off to get water and bring it to my dad, who was this guy from Australia that's, this handsome, larger than life figure. And they got married like a few days later. So it was
Right,
quick.
right, right. And and I'm assuming they stayed together.
They did stay together and they're still together.
Right,
They're in the same house in Toronto that I grew up in.
right. Now,
So my dad was living in Australia at the time.
what are your parents called? What's their names?
So it's Pando and Bona.
And the surname
Um,
again?
Straklevsky.
Straklevsky. What a powerful name.
Straklevsky. Yeah.
So your dad and
Yes.
I have something in common in that we're both being refugees. Can you speak a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, yeah. And Shiva and I, when I found out that you were a refugee in the same camp that my father was in the 50s, I was shocked because I had never heard anyone else mention the name of that place before.
Mm,
It's just
mm,
something that my dad speaks of, and
mm.
to hear somebody else speak of this place and have experiences was pretty cool. So that was a pretty cool connection between us. So when my dad was 18, Jivan, he decided, and he had planned it to leave communist Yugoslavia at the time and go over the mountains across where Bukova was and over
Yeah,
into Greece in search of adventure, in search
yeah.
of what more there
Better
could
life,
be.
a better life.
Yeah, yeah. And so he did that with just the shirt on his back. He went and found himself in Greece in a refugee camp,
We love you.
and he was there for yes, and he was there for 18 months, and this was about 1956. So he learned to swim, which would come in handy a few years later. But from there, he was shipped off to Belgium to work in Charleroi or Charleroi, I'm not even sure, in Belgium, to work in a mine. There was some sort of agreement that the Greek government had with Belgium, that they would send these foreign workers. So my dad had agreed to that, and so it was very dangerous. It was 3,000 feet deep into this mine. And so it was probably about 1958, 1957 that my dad was sent to work in this mine, and he hated it. It was very, very dangerous. Just the year
Yep.
before, in 1956,
Yep.
there were over 200 foreign workers that were killed in that same mine. And it was all foreign people, like people like
Yep.
my dad,
Yep.
Macedonians, Italians.
Yep.
That's the
Yep.
people who died.
Yep. Yep.
So that's where my dad was, and he just wanted to. He's like, I don't care what they pay me. I don't know. I don't care what's going on in this place. I got to get out of here.
Gotta
No
leave it.
matter what, I'm done here. So that was his mindset, but he didn't want to go back to Yugoslavia, and he felt that if he protested or complained, that he would get sent.
Come back.
So
Yeah.
he ended up making his way to Germany, to Bremerhaven, and he stowed away on a boat. He stowed away on a ship. Some of his friends that he had met in the mine, and they were ex-Yugoslav people, like a lot of Serbs
Yep.
and Croats and,
Yep.
uh, and
Yep.
Macedonians, and they all had a bit of an alliance. They all spoke a similar language, so they could
Yep.
communicate. So they gravitated towards each other because they didn't speak English, they didn't, they weren't Italian, they didn't speak
Yep.
German,
Yep.
so they understood each other, and they needed somebody to be their new family. So that became my dad's new family, were these ex-Yugoslavs there. And some of them had passage to Australia from
Oh,
this ship. My dad had no money though, so he couldn't get passage. So they helped him stow away, and snuck him onto the boat.
your
Yeah,
dad's a
and so
stowaway.
he was a stowaway
Can
from
I ask you a
Bremerhaven on
question?
the Skyburn.
May I ask you a question here? Where did he intend to go when he escaped across the border? Because we intended to go to America, not Australia. Australia wasn't even on our radar. In fact,
I,
my grandfather,
yeah.
on my mother's father went to America in 37. And in fact, my cousins over there, they married from Bukovo. They married a
Oh,
Bukovska
wow.
family. Yeah. So
Oh,
that's
it's a
my
small
connection to
world.
Bukovo. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wish I could remember. I'm sure I would have met your dad, Nasha, because the young guys of your dad's generation, 18, 19, 20, they used to
Yeah.
take me along with them. I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And they taught me about the birds and the bees and all that sort of stuff. So I was a
Yeah.
I was a staro malo, thanks to people like your dad. And
That's so cool.
it's such a connection that you and I have. Okay,
It
so
is.
so then your dad went to Australia and he took he went back and took your mum back. Is that right? Have I got it right?
You've got it right. I'm going to insert a part where he was on the Skyburn from Bremerhaven to Australia, and somewhere in that 2-week journey, when they were in Aden, near the Red Sea, the ship
I didn't.
burnt
Yeah, I
down.
know that. Yeah. The what? What
Yeah,
happened?
the ship burnt down. The ship burnt down. The ship, if you look it up, Skyburn, 1958, March 14th, Skyburn burns in Aden in the Red Sea. A mayday went out. My dad got in a lifeboat. It was women and children first, one man per boat. My dad was a young man, and my dad was going to jump into the sea with like threw something in. It was going to float
Yeah,
on it,
yeah.
and then one of the officers grabbed him and put him in the lifeboat. So along with some German lady that knew how to actually row, because my dad didn't know how to row, they managed to get away from the burning ship and were rescued,
Wow.
and went to Aden and stayed in Aden for about a month until another ship came and took them to Australia.
So
So that's my
before we
dad's story.
right, another question, like, so when he arrived in Australia with no papers, what happened?
You know what? I think it was different back then. it wasn't computerized. So my dad said when people started lining up and going to for the call register, my dad said I just hid and ran away. So I guess you could just get off and run away back in those days, because that's what he did. He said I was, his first chance I got, I was out of there and didn't look back. So
Look,
that's
if I can, we came out with the church. There was a World Council of Churches organization in those days, and we came out with an identification card issued by them. And so you could easily getting calls. I told them not to call, but some people just, I'm irresistible. So I gotta call me in the morning, Nasha. Anyway, so that's how we came out. So I guess your dad could have said, I've lost my passport or whatever. And Australia was keen to have migrants in those days. So then he
yeah,
went back.
yeah.
He went
He
to
went back
Wollongong.
to,
Wollongong,
yes,
was it?
he ended up, he did go to Wollongong and Port Kembla. So he I think he sold his watch for the train fare from Melbourne because the ship docked in Melbourne. He sold his watch, his only worldly possession, for the fare to Port Kembla, and he found somebody that eventually directed him to a Macedonian club. My dad said, "Take me to a Macedonian club." I don't know if those things still exist, but it did then. And so
Oh, they
that's
did.
where
They did.
someone took him, dropped him off, and then my dad found his people. He found, people connected to him in some way that helped him start to get established. Everyone had to start somewhere.
And they used to live singly, they called them. Someone would have a house and there'd be like 2 beds or
Yes.
3 beds in a room, whatever. And I also heard, Sue, that apparently some people used to share a bed. They'd be on night shift and they'd sleep in the bed during the day and so on. Look, I was too young. I didn't go through that. But what I did go through was living in the house of people from Dragos, whose dad had been in Australia since the 20s, late 20s. And there was one house, like what today would be considered a tiny house. There was the family, the son and his family of the owner of the house. There was us. There were 2 cousins of ours. There was another cousin. There were 4 families living in this tiny little house. Now there's 2 people living in mansions. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's incredible what's happened, In my lifetime, we've gone from being poor migrants, huddling together in houses, to living in mansions.
Yeah.
So tell me, your dad, you did mention your dad went back, and then your mum went back for you to be born in Macedonia. Was that the
That is
reason?
correct. So my older brother was born in Australia. My parents had been married several years at that point. And then she was pregnant with me. So there she was with a 3-year-old boy, and pregnant with me, and no other family in Port Kembla. My dad had a job at the steel factory there in Port Kembla. So he was working all
Steelworks.
sorts of shifts and things. Yeah. So she went back to Macedonia um, to have me there, and to have the family around,
Support.
to help with my brother, to help with me. And then when I was 7 months old, we all went back to Australia, and that's when I met my dad.
Wow.
So I was born in Bitola,
Vital Chanka.
Bitola, Tonga.
But
Yes, yes,
Nasha, you guys from Bukovo, that's practically next door anyway.
it is.
From my father's from Dragos, which is on the border. My mum's on Vlasic, which is on the border. So for us, Bukovo was a big village close to town. It was a little bit not upper class. We were all peasants, all poor peasants.
Village.
But
Yeah,
it was a renowned village, Bukovo. And it was renowned
yeah.
also because they have a little Bukovsko accent in certain words too.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah,
I'm not aware of that.
yeah.
Um,
Well, that's
you
because
know,
you left when you were little. So,
yeah, yeah.
what do you remember of Australia? By the
Oh
way,
boy.
we miss you. We miss you. We wish you were here, but you went to a good
Due for a
place.
trip, Jivan. I'm due for a trip, and when I make that trip, and it'll be in the next couple of years, we'll definitely sit down and have coffee. And I would like to join you at your coffee club.
More
You
than
know, when
coffee.
I'm there.
More
Yeah.
than coffee, Nasha. It will be a delight to meet you in person. So
So that'll happen.
you you actually you went to school in Australia
I
a little
did go
bit.
to school in Australia. When I was in kindergarten, though, so it was just in kindergarten. After that, we moved to Canada. And my dad wanted to come to Canada. My dad had a brother, my uncle Boris was here in Canada. And I guess my dad had he had this I don't know, this Americana, this dream in his head where, you know, Sakashe de Odivo America. I don't
You
know
know,
why, you know, personally I would rather be in Australia, but that's what he did. And maybe you were, to your point, you were saying you had a goal, you set out. That was your initial goal, was to go to the States. And
America.
by yeah. And so maybe, and I didn't ask my dad, that's a good question. Perhaps that was the goal for him. And he ended up in Australia, but he did, you know, continue with that and ended up coming not to America, close though, Canada. So
Well, look,
here we
with
are.
with all due respects to all our American friends, I love America. I'm a critic of American foreign policy and stuff, but I love America. America was the land of dreams when I was a kid.
There was that romanticism for sure. The
Correct,
movies, the
correct.
music, you know, Elvis, all the, you know, James Dean, Elizabeth
Everything.
Taylor, all that stuff, you know. I think Europeans were mesmerized with it.
Well, the very name America was like a magic word for me, you know. If Let me digress for a second. So we used to get lots of food parcels and clothes parcels from my dad in Rochester, New York, which is a couple of hours from you guys only
It's
across the
close.
border.
Lots of Bukov Tsitamu.
Oh, that's right. That's why my cousin's married. So, you know, we'd get all these beautiful clothes. So when we arrived in Australia, we were all dressed up like Americans, not like Macedonians. And our
Yeah.
relatives here are looking at us and we're waving back at them. Here we are. So one of my cousins said, she said, when you guys came, you guys look like movie stars. We hadn't seen
Wow.
clothes like that, you know, because of the clothing, you know, real
Yeah.
Americana
It's
clothing.
a different
But
style for sure. Every country's got its thing going on, its own
well,
style.
in the 50s, America was roaring, you know, absolutely,
That
like
was
you
its
said,
heyday for sure.
a heyday. So I used to think that my Dedo Yosef was a millionaire, a rich millionaire. He was a short order cook, you know, like
Wow.
just a
Yeah.
cook.
Yeah.
And when I went
Yeah.
there, it was a tiny little house. But just that image of America, despite him being like just a working class person, for us, he was America. Oh, America ci
Yeah.
vedi.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
It's funny how that there's a little bit of a holdover still with that, I think.
yes,
You know,
there
there's still
is,
that
there
with
is.
perhaps just with the older generation.
When my brother and I first went together, because he went before me, he went as a 3-year-old first. And my father actually went to America, which I found out later, to see if we should migrate to America. This is in
Wow.
1964 even. And he went there and
Wow.
came back, said, no, 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 we're better off here. And I wanted to
Yeah.
say that when my brother and I came to Toronto, we loved it. We loved it.
Oh,
And
when were
I
you in
don't,
Toronto?
um, 80s, in the 80s, sometime was the first time. And we just thought Toronto, it reminded us a lot of Australia in a way. It
Yeah.
was, it had all the good things of America and not many of the bad things that we
Yeah.
thought.
Agreed. I think it's still like that.
And we
Yeah.
loved it. So, yeah. And I also came another time and it was winter and so something that we don't know, you know, we
Yeah,
don't know that kind of
and
winter.
that's okay. You don't need to know about that.
So
Yeah, I
let
don't like the cold.
you Um, I've seen you on TV, on Canadian TV. What were you doing there?
Okay. So I worked on a show called The Shopping Channel. And that is, and I'm sure in Australia you have a version of it where
Yeah, we
it's
do.
like they sell stuff. What's it called in
I,
Australia?
I don't know.
Okay.
I
All
don't
right. So
watch
it's the
TV
shopping
anymore.
channel here.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a channel and it was across Canada and there would be like, a product and I would talk for half an hour about that product,
yeah,
there's no
yeah,
script.
yeah,
There's, you're just talking about the product and there's usually two of you, it's me and somebody else and we're like talking like this product is the greatest thing in the world and you have to get this and they're
yeah,
black
yeah,
and
yeah,
they're
yeah.
big and they're great and you can use them anywhere. It's sunny out. You need that sort of thing. So that's what I did for
Okay,
about
so
4 or 5 years.
what's your journey before that took you there? Obviously, you went back to school and you became a good Canadian. Were you like me? Were you like fascinated with the Anglo world? Because when I was a kid, I was, my education, my entertainment was all in English. So I was like fascinated with the Anglo world as a little kid.
I don't know that I was fascinated because it's all I knew. So I don't know that I
Right.
was fascinated. It was my environment. That's all I've known my entire life.
Yeah.
Um, so it was my friends, everyone spoke English. You turn on the TV, it's in English. I'm watching the Brady Bunch, I'm watching Gilligan's Island, I'm watching Fantasy Island level. It's all in English. So yeah, it was part of that whole upbringing. That was my culture. The holidays, the public holidays, like Christmas and Easter, and it's all, the Canadian holidays. So it's very easy to get caught up in that's your world when that's all you know. So the key was trying to hang on to the Macedonian part that was getting
Good
ripped at
point.
constantly and becoming smaller and smaller and eroding. The key was trying to hang on to that. But when you're a kid and you're a teenager, all that really matters are your friends, your peers, where you're going to go the next night. So the part about your roots and your culture is not so dominant to you. Everything else is. So it wasn't until later in life for me when I started to reach back and delve into who am I, what makes me different from all the sameness here. And what is it with Macedonia and the thing is, growing up, I was very close with my family. We're a very close family. So any major holiday, we were at the Macedonian church. We celebrated Macedonian holidays. If my parents were Nagosti, and they're very social, every weekend they were Nagosti. Macedonians are very social people, and I went with them everywhere. Every church dance, I went to it. I went to Sunday school to learn to read Macedonian and to write it. I'm not great at it, but I can read it and write it. And I went and they signed me up for Macedonian dance, folk dance classes. So I went and did that at the church as well. So the church was central to my upbringing. It gave me that basis so that when I was ready to explore my roots had a good foundation.
Um,
And I guess I hate to credit Facebook for this, but it did kind of bring me, to you, to everybody else, to have this commonality. We've got something huge in common that I don't have with other people. And
yeah,
even though there's like let's take my group, for example, 55,000 people, we don't all see eye to eye. We all have a million different opinions, different takes on politics, different ways we want to cook food, different ways we want to raise our family. We're not, we're more different than the same, but what we have the same is the Macedonianism, and that's why we're all there. And miraculously, somehow, we're all just okay with you not agreeing with me. I'm just happy that you're Macedonian, and we're just gonna celebrate that part of our
yeah,
relationship and tolerate everything else. And
yeah.
that's what the group is.
Look, Facebook is a wonderful tool. It really, I think, it brought us all together, as you said, but it's
Yeah,
also a place we can go to celebrate and educate ourselves. I want
this
to
is it.
before we get into a little bit, say, more not political, but social about what's happening today in Macedonia. Did you guys in Canada being non-Canadians, being immigrants, was there any kind of, not snobbery, but any sort of looking down upon, did Canadians, the original, and I'm not talking
Did
about
did
the
did
indigenous,
did I look down on Canadians, or did
no, no,
Canadians
no,
look down
no.
on me?
Did they look down on us?
Of
Did they,
course,
yeah,
of course. Oh my God. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I was the kid, that had coffee in my thermos at lunch in grade three. To me, it was normal. I had coffee, yeah, it had like five sugars in it, mind you, but it was coffee. And my Canadian friends just thought that was hilarious that I had
yeah,
coffee, and everyone's got their cute little, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches all
yeah,
packaged.
yeah,
And I've got last night's polnati piperki, with a little chunk of bread or whatever. So yeah, there were differences, and I felt self-conscious. I felt self-conscious that when my parents came to parent-teacher interviews, they didn't speak English. I felt behind when I had homework to do, and the other kids had their parents helping them. Nobody. I was on my own. Not
yeah.
only that, but I had to actually help my parents with writing checks and paying bills and reading mails and translating. So
And,
I feel
and
like, us kids had a huge disadvantage.
so were you the interpreter like me? Or
Yeah,
sometimes not just for the family,
totally.
but for relatives and friends. That was
Sure,
my
sure.
role. That was my,
Yeah, yeah. So I'm like an eight-year old that's trying to find my own way at school, and trying to fit in with my circle and do assignments. But I've got this added role of being an interpreter, and helping pay bills and writing out checks and things like that. So it was a layer of stress that I feel that Canadian kids didn't have to deal with that. So they had an advantage.
yeah.
We had a disadvantage, Jivan, from the get-go.
Yeah, correct. Another thing that I'd like to explore with you is, did you um were there did you have any friends who were from Ege who were Girkomani, or was there anything like that in
For sure.
because I grew up in a community where siblings were divided, where fathers and sons were divided. Uh, Interestingly
Yeah.
enough, Nasha, guess what's happening here? Some of the people of my generation who didn't experience the terror and oppression in Ege are now waking up. And it's like, I'm going to lunch with my cousin now, who 5 years ago, in his 50s, realized who he is. Now he's arguably more passionate than what I am. So
Yeah, and
interesting things
that's
are happening.
wonderful.
So,
Yeah,
and we
that's
have,
really nice to see that. Yeah, so same thing. I grew up in a neighborhood in East Toronto that there's a lot of Greek kids in my school and a lot of Macedonian kids in my school. There was a Greek school after school at my school
yeah,
where Greek propaganda was taught. They had a map showing Macedonia. There's no Macedonia. It's Greek. So they were teaching this stuff to the kids. So of course, when they come to school the next day, they're pointing to us and telling us that our language doesn't exist. So I grew up constantly being pointed at and told that my language doesn't
yeah,
exist. You're Greek.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you know, you know how to speak Greek. Why don't you speak Greek? I don't know how to speak Greek,
yeah,
and I had to
yeah,
like convince
yeah.
people. So I was arguing about my identity and who I was from a very young age, as
We,
well. So there's
we,
that.
we,
And then yes, there was people that Greek Macedonians that identified as Greek because that just made life easier for them.
yes,
Um, and
and,
and
and
that's
and
what that is.
and Greek is such a prestigious label. My God, it's become nonsensical. It's so prestigious that people say I'm Greek, and they think somehow that makes them better than if they had said they're something else. That's the problem. Look, that's probably an issue we shouldn't be discussing, but it's the
Yeah, here
reality.
we are. Like,
It's the
we
reality of our
we
life.
can't not discuss it. I get it because it's such a passionate part of who we are. And it's something that resonates with both of us and most Macedonians. It resonates with them. So you can't not go there because it's part of what makes us and part
It
of
is.
what makes us passionate towards Macedonia.
Well, Bukovo is just a little bit maybe too far for you to have had lots of relatives across the border. But there are people, even in Bukovo, who had relatives across the border. Whereas we, the border villages, like I've got virtually more relatives south of the border than in Macedonia. That's the reality of our life. And we couldn't escape it because it was me, it was my grandmother in conflict with her sister, me in conflict with my second cousins. It was a
Wow.
tragedy. It's a tragedy of Macedonia, Nasha. And
What's
speaking
it
of,
like now there? Uh,
um,
s- in
there's a,
Ege? Or is the I see videos and I read things and it seems like that passion, that interest, that quest for knowledge, that wanting to regain their roots, that's flourishing and starting to come back alive. I think the fear is starting to diminish and they're starting to rise up. I think
Sue,
that's what I'm seeing.
Sue, when 2016, when we met online, I went south of the border. I couldn't believe what's going on there. There is a renaissance there so deep and so widespread that I
I
never,
love it.
not in my most beautiful dreams about Macedonia did I think I would see what's happening in Ege. I dare to say that the passion over there, we in the Republic, we took it for granted that we were who we were. But once you've had it taken away and then you rediscover it, just my cousin, who I'm going to do an interview with, uh, he is he typifies what's happening in Ege, except not in Ege here. This
Yeah.
awareness that all this time we've been put down. So in my trip in 2016, having been in Greece, I speak Greek pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. And what I do speak, I speak, having learned as a little kid, I have a Greek accent. So I'd ask everybody I met in Ege, are you a local or are you a refugee? Because that's how they refer to themselves. They use the word dopios, which means local, and prosviga, which means refugee. Every time I asked that word, you know what I got? No one said I'm a dopios. They said, I am Macedonian. Ime Makedonos, Ime Makedona. Sue, if you
Do
get a
the
chance,
flag.
thank you, love. If you get a chance next time, go to Ege. And
I
before
want to.
before you
You're reading
go,
my mind. I do want to do that.
before you go, let me know. I'll some people that I know there you could meet, because it's a different perspective once you meet them. So
Yeah.
in Ege, it's exploding. Macedonian culture is exploding. There is a village called oh geez, getting old now. Anyway, Ovčarani is a village that started all this. In 2016 there was a conference by the Australian Macedonian human rights people. Well, we had people from America and everywhere, academics, and I went to that conference. And as a part of that conference, we went to the Panegir in Ovčarani. So we're driving in, and we had a police escort because they thought we'd get bashed by the Golden Dawn
Oh my
dickheads.
God.
Nothing happened. So as we
Yeah.
drive in, um, off the main road towards the village road, we're getting close to the village. Stu, I'm seeing African guys setting up stalls to sell stuff. And I'm thinking, what? Well, isn't this just a little Macedonia? There are over 10,000 people there. There were young
Wow.
kids, 16, 17-year-old little kids, waiters, walking around singing along to Macedonian songs, but not
That's
Bolen Leshim
amazing.
Lat, not Bolen Leshim Lat Stoyan songs or love songs, partisan songs. That blew me away.
Wow.
So I met this guy. You may have seen him online. He calls himself More Sokol from the famous song More Sokol Pia, right? So he calls him that. He's from the Solunska area. And I met him and I said, man, I can't believe what's going on. I'm getting goosebumps just being here. Is this real? Is this happening everywhere? He said, I'll take you to 100 villages in Solun, and everyone is having a panagir in Macedonia. Yet 25 years ago, when those guys did it, the cops came, smashed it, smashed, and told them not to do it again. 5 years
Yeah.
ago, when this tiny little village where a lot of the people came to here, they were having it. There's only like about 20 or 30 in the village, but they still have their panagir. They were playing Macedonian music. The
Yeah.
policeman comes along and says, cut that out. Okay, blah, 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 as they do. And in the past, Nasha, they would have gone, yes, sir, no, sir. Yes, sir, no. You know what the mayor of the village said to him? I want that in writing, because once you write that in writing, I'm going to sue the pants off you. How dare you refuse my human rights? That's one of the positives that happened when they got into the European Union. That was a positive. I'm not really a fan of the European Union, also because of its foreign policies, but that's helped our people in Macedonia, in Greek occupied Macedonia. It's given them wings, whereas
Yeah.
once they were laden down, their feet were in concrete slabs. They couldn't move, the poor people.
Yeah. Yeah. It was all out genocide. Yeah.
So, getting back to Macedonia, how do you see the situation there? Do do you do you think that we'll make it through this period? Do you think? What do you think? I'm very
I
pessimistic. I've got to be honest.
I don't really follow the politics, to be honest.
Yep.
I really just focus on the group, the people, and talking about and strengthening what is Macedonian and the culture and tradition. I really just focus on that, Jivan. I don't really get into the politics of it. I'm really, really happy that the current party was elected. She's a woman, but I'm really behind that party. I think it was the right time. The country needs that change. And people need to come back to their Macedonian identity and need to fight for that. And this is the party to do that. So 100% that. Where do I think it's going? I don't know. There's a lot of enemies. I hate to use that word, but they're not our fans. Like the Greeks, the Bulgarians, the Albanians, the Serbs. I feel like we're surrounded by everyone that wants a part of us. So I don't know. I don't know too much about that, the politics in there. I just know that everyone wants a piece of us. And you really need a strong government that believes in its cause and is passionate about it to get through it. Nothing else, no other kind of government is going to make it with all that pressure. You've got to have people ruling that country at this point in time that are doing it for the heart. And I feel like, at this point in time, we're doing the right things that need to happen. Things have been messed up before this.
I hope you're right, 100%. Only time will tell. But I loved your
Yeah.
answer because it was honest, and you you said it. You're not really into the politics of it. But what you are doing, Nasha, it's not political, but ultimately everything has some political implications. And your group is a really positive, culturally,
Shining that
historically.
little spark a little bit, Jivan. I might be blowing a little bit of wind on that fire to get it going.
You are, Nasha. I want to thank you again. I hope that we can every now and then have a little chat, even if it's only 10, 15 minutes. I love talking to you, Nasha. And if you
It's
come
been
to us,
fun. Time has flown like that. It's been, and I feel like, I don't know if you feel like this. We touched on each topic ever so quickly. We didn't really delve into it because we had to like talk about something else. But it'd be great to kind of delve into stuff at some other point.
um, this is just the beginning, I hope. And once again, thank you. I don't know, when you come to Australia, you're going to have a legion of people who want to meet you. But but first
Well,
up,
I want to meet them too.
first up, you meet your relatives, then you meet us at the coffee club because we're your fans.
Absolutely.
We're your fans.
Definitely.
And Nasha, I'm your fan, and I'm the fan of anybody out there who started a group and who's doing something to educate and to celebrate our culture.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
And
gonna
to
get a
promote.
picture of us together. I'm gonna get a photo of us.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you very
And then I
much.
can.
I just
Thank you,
want to wish
Jivan. It
you,
was a pleasure.
I want to wish you all the best, not just for your group, but in your personal life, Nasha. And
Absolutely, and the same as well. And thank you for
so
everything you do. I know that you're a voice that's always advocating for positive change. And so you're a hero.
I've been political. I grew up political. My dad was very involved. Even when he first arrived, within a couple of months, he contacted all the old people here from Ege who had started our organizations. And I believe that people can change, can impact positively or negatively, depending on what they do. And I'm trying to be a positive, but sometimes the truth is unpleasant. And I don't shy away from telling that truth because I don't think that you can build anything on false hopes and on untruths. I think the truth is more important than your own personal popularity in a group or whatever. So once again, Nasha, you got to come to Australia.
I know, I know,
You've
I
got
know.
to.
It's on my bucket list for sure.
All right. Thank you. And
Thank
regards
you.
to, and please share this on yours. You got to share this
I
on yours because you've
I
got
will.
55,000, Nasha. Bravo.
Well, we'll talk again, but yeah, I would be delighted to share this.
Thank you. Goodbye, Nasha.
Thanks and have a great day.
The GV Macedonia is my last thing.
Yes, I'm going to hold the flag up as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, Jivan.
Bye. Bye-bye.